I love Pokemon. In fact, millions of people love Pokemon, and I mean, who doesn't love Pokemon? They're awesome to catch and train, the trading cards are fun to collect, the anime is a delight to watch, and the games are enjoyable to play when you get down to it. But it does seem that nowadays, something has been missing from all of that. Something off is within the Pokemon brand, and it seems that now more than ever, it is showing itself off in more ways than none. Like the puzzle pieces are finally in place to see what mystery is lurking in the shadows of this somewhat cutesy brand we all cherish so much, and how this is the one spark that the franchise has been missing for quite some time now. And by that I mean that the modern games suck ass. Yeah, this is what this is about. Hope you enjoyed that little intro. Yeah, it seems that Pokemon has been in a state of decline that everyone in the franchise is a bit disappointed about in recent memory. Although disappointed is a soft word to really describe what they're thinking, but I don't want to pull out the dictionary to find the right word now, do I? With the past 5 years of mediocrity, frame rate issues, insanity, and seemingly trying to fit pieces together that don't work, the state of Pokemon is in some paradox, you could say, when it comes down to the experiences you make with each entry. Some entries are great, no doubt about that, like Generation 3 and Generation 4, where those brought us some of the best in terms of Pokemon roster, characters, music, and setting, to which was all amplified with Generation 5 later on in the Nintendo DS's lifespan, to then having entries like Pokemon Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield, where from the start of it seems like good experiences, and I would say to some of them they are, but when the high is gone from hours of gameplay and beating the game's main story, suddenly you're left wondering, staring at the screen with one simple thought in your mind being, was that it? And I'm sure many feel this way when it comes down to their experiences, where the enjoyment is only temporary while slowly but surely you start to realize that the game aged either like the finest wine there is or the stankiest of milk ever made. Because of that, I'd wonder to myself, since I've been a Pokemon fan since the Nintendo DS era with Diamond and Pearl, about this feeling of bewilderment and dissatisfaction, where eventually it led me to making this very video you see before you. Yeah, a video expressing my thoughts, much like everyone else in the Pokemon community, about how Pokemon as a franchise needs, or should I rather say, deserves to have better games moving forward. Oh, just me saying that probably already triggered some folks, I can feel it. So unlike a previous video where I ranted for 17 minutes straight about how bad the modern state of Pokemon has been, or made a 13-minute one about the state of modern Pokemon, I decided to do things a bit differently by studying the ways of game development and become a big brain YouTuber this time around. All for a franchise that has an electric mouse that even makes Disney quiver in fear. Nah, what I'm going to be focused on here really isn't the whole speech of games bad, don't buy philosophy that the average Pokemon fan has had, because I'd figured if I just focus for the next few minutes on what Pokemon has done right and can improve from there, then we can perhaps have a conversation going. After all, it's all about improving the franchise rather than just have it hung out to dry. And no matter how much we ignore the current status of the franchise or how people think they know how to improve the franchise when really they don't, the idea is to just realize what Pokemon can actually do when they put the energy to make it. And I also want to point out that the idea that Pokemon needs to improve and me wanting it to improve are two very distinctive points, given that, like that video about me going off at Pokemon Company for not doing their job properly with the mainline series, the core concept with this video is the wanting aspect at the end of the day. Because listen, I'm no game developer, but I am a man with hopes and many dreams. Lastly, this isn't a video about making the perfect Pokemon game, because honestly, we already had that and it was called the Black and White Duology that released almost 11 years ago. No, I won't elaborate any further. But okay, let's start the conversation of improving Pokemon by stating the obvious the more we stare long enough at the screen, which is of course the graphical fidelity. While we can argue all day that graphics don't make a game bad so long as it plays well, this argument can mostly extend up until the indie scene. This is generally because in the indie settings with games like Lunistis and Frogun to even Celeste, they keep the audience engaged with a simplistic graphical style that harbors nostalgia as a basis and room to provide something different in the vast fast-paced world of gaming, hence why their graphics are the way that they are. Pokemon, on the other hand, doesn't even have that leeway, because let's be real here, they are a multi-million-dollar franchise. I mean, they got more money than whatever the hell I'll be receiving on the check this month, that's for sure. Due to them banking in a good million every now and then, their current affairs of having the mainline series be the way that they are isn't something that can be excusable at this point. As mentioned on the previous videos and others before it, the Nintendo Switch has games that are built with insane graphical design despite what others say about it on Twitter X. With games like the Xenoblade Chronicles series, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, to even Metroid Prime Remastered, Pokemon having the environmental design like how it is with Scarlet and Violet isn't something that screams AAA for the Nintendo Switch. Hell, it doesn't even go past the first A. While I enjoyed games like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for instance, I still complained about the fact that its graphics were like this Play-Doh texture that felt like it was about to combust at any given moment. Frame rate was choppy, the graphics didn't scream like it was a Pokemon game that had intentions of being, well, good, and paired with the elements that they took from Legends Arceus, some of them I should say, Pokemon SV wasn't enough of a full course meal to experience in my opinion. It was like an appetizer that was sitting there for too long at the counter that the waiter forgot to bring to the table until like the very last second. So in order to improve environmental design, the best way I can think of for Pokemon Company to ensure quality would be to have more third-party support in development, because let's face it, they don't have the numbers, and they sure as hell need the help. Similar to how Legend of Zelda was co-developed with Monolith Soft in some aspects with the latest titles, the same can be done with Pokemon here too. Especially since Monolith Soft, first of all, they're like the champions of environmental design and good graphical work period for the Nintendo Switch, thanks to their latest games like the definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and of course currently Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Those games opted for such stellar presentation and visuals that allowed for an immersion of being involved with the world of each entry. And just imagining that for a second for Pokemon, that would be like the biggest dream come true for everybody here. The mainline Pokemon series would just add way more charm and uniqueness to them if their graphical fidelity had more to offer visually, which was something that Pokemon Legends Arceus was able to do well for its initial release. Its environmental design had an exploration value and the idea of learning the lay of the land, and while it wasn't open world like Scarlet and Violet, it gave us a lot more cool details and locales that are always a treat to revisit because of their distinctiveness. Plus, out of the two games, comparatively speaking, Legends Arceus felt like there was more love and effort put into the graphics, while Pokemon Scarlet and Violet felt like it was just a quota to fill for that year. We can also extend this graphical design argument over to the Let's Go games that released no later than 2017, where despite being a third remake of Generation 1, it still brought that charm to the franchise that I think works well because of how much they improved on its graphical work. Something like that is really all we need for the future of Pokemon, because it shows what the people want while just adding more to offer. Which again, if you just let Monolith Soft help you guys out, this can be done in such an incredible way, you know, and still make profits out of it, just saying. Secondly, the games need a lot more polish in terms of their performances, as granted, the graphical fidelity would be neat and all for a Pokemon game, but if it doesn't perform well, then we're left with a pretty awful experience that no one wants to have, despite ensuring that the games could sell close to 3 million copies in just 2 days. God, this franchise really just takes the fun out of things sometimes, doesn't it? Again, this point is mainly addressed at Pokemon Scarlet and Violet because, well, look at it, and so I think for the next set of games, this desperately needs to be double checked and be play tested properly, or else it'll end up feeling like another insane cash grab that while it's really fun to play, it requires a level of numbness from the player, especially if they are one of those frame rate freaks. And trust me, you don't want them in your sheets. Performance here in terms of explanations though, I would say it's very minimal, since it is important that a game is optimized with the proper functionalities and quality control that allows it to function properly. Otherwise, it becomes something truly worth laughing at as opposed to giving praise, like Sonic 06 and the Storybook games, where those games are the very foundation of bad frame rate and performance issues, on top of everything else that makes those games absolute dumpster fires. With Pokemon, it's ensuring that the coding is functional with the open world and environmental design, and just brings something that they brought to the table back with Pokemon Legends Arceus. That, and again, the employment of third-party support can greatly benefit this progress of game development, but I am kind of talking as if I have experience in that department when really, I don't. Look man, I just want my Pokemon games to be good. Moving on from the graphical aspects and now onto more of quality of life, Pokemon desperately needs better animation for their games more than ever. In an era where games like to show off their performance not through the graphical fidelity but also through the movement of the characters and their relationship in the world they get to explore, Pokemon has offered none of that in the slightest with their recent games. From Pokemon Let's Go to now with the DLCs for Scarlet and Violet, there doesn't seem to be this sense of fluidity in terms of the characters and their interactions with the world. It all feels so stale that for the most part, you kind of forget most of what you're doing because you're not taken aback by it all, except for a couple of things here and there. This has also been an issue that has plagued as far back as the inception of 3D Pokemon with Pokemon X and Y back on the Nintendo 3DS, where there hasn't been much thought in terms of allowing a sense of active participation to occur for the player due to how stiff the animation feels for practically everything, unlike the 2D games. If you want to say it's because they should move from a turn-based combat to a more real-time one, you do you, but I think the animation regardless needs more of a presence rather than it being an afterthought. To compare it to the Persona franchise for a moment, Persona 5 to be specific, you see that game bases its combat on turn-based mechanics, but offers a lot of visual stimulation for the player to also experience. This is either with the simple attack animations to the impact the gun feels for each character when they use it, to how they animated the effects of the Persona and how they elevate the battlefield with their attacks. Pokemon can learn a thing or two with these dynamic approaches. And to give something of an idea related to Pokemon, if you ever seen the Twitter account Millennium Loops, you can see more of that basis in their core concept art and sketches. It shows that it is possible to give both real-time effect and turn-based structure for Pokemon, elevating both the gameplay and the quality of life by large degrees. Pokemon Legends Arceus again even tried this approach in the way they handle the battling in the game, having the real-time scenario in place in the overworld and improving the asset design and animation they have for each move. Something like that is really all you need to make a good combat system for Pokemon, and if you want more incentives, then hell, take a page off of Persona if you want at the end of the day. My point is that combat and quality of life needs to be massively improved. Better animations, better UI design, better art design, all those things need improvements so that the shine appears shiny and functional rather than shiny and still leaving the rest to rot to dust. But you know what else would add value to the franchise? Something that no one has thought of up until this very moment in time? Something that would truly add some expansive storytelling and personality into the mix? Well, shit, I wasn't really thinking that, but you know what? Let's roll with it. Yeah, so the last thing to discuss and the most important one, because I still do not understand that for a major franchise that has tons of anime series and one-offs, does not have an inch of voice acting in their mainline games, and yet for some reason they have it for Pokemon Masters EX, which I should stress is a mobile game of all things. Look, one of the things that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet kind of bothered me the most was this lack of voice direction, or really an absence of it, especially when you look back at how well animated the cutscenes were. If the cutscenes were to be this dynamic as those, then how in the hell would you not stress a voice cast, which is something that countless of games have done regarding JRPGs? Hell, Breath of the Wild was complimented for having a proper voice cast after so many years of not having one, but even then those games had voice direction in terms of grunts and sound effects, which again, Pokemon doesn't have. This right here is the biggest thing that I think they should start working on for the next mainline games, because as much as I've stressed enough about the previous things, if there is no voice cast, then you shouldn't be building this grand world to explore, especially again for a RPG title like Pokemon. It was passable back in the 90s with the SNES era, sure, but we're not in the 90s anymore. We're now in 2023, close to 2024, damn it, and Namona needs a f***ing voice. Like, imagine playing all of Persona or Xenoblade Chronicles and the cutscenes that have the most story end up being muted entirely. It would end up losing on the impact of the story and the characters by so much. And with Pokemon here, it doesn't hurt not to try it out, you guys. Especially since, again, you have a mobile game that gives a good voice cast that everybody seems to love. Pokemon would improve massively if it has a voice cast, and I'm not joking, because it would go a long way from making the games have more enjoyment enjoyment out of with the story and with the characters especially, which is one of Pokemon's biggest focal points. Voice direction essentially goes a long way towards providing a good story and a good foundation of immersion to go on, which is again the entire foundation of Pokemon to begin with. You are the protagonist, you are involved with the region, its history, its Pokemon, and the rivals and characters that are tied to the story itself. So why excuse the lack of voice cast simply because it's for the sake of imagination? That's just so damn stupid. In fact, while we're at it, let's just rant a little bit more here since I got the time to spare, so why not do a quick 1-2 punch on some ideas I got for Pokemon. First of all, improve the combat system, because like I said, we can keep the turn-based mechanics for sure, but we should also make it rewarding in terms of its animation, its controls, and the idea that these are indeed Pokemon battles. I don't want any more of that ass-shaking animation, Pokemon Company. I need a Pokemon to actually throw it back to me and do a proper tail whip. Secondly, I want more player control and freedom, because in an open world-like setting, every action is needed to give a holistic approach. That's why in Breath of the Wild, Link has a jump, a run, and a climbing ability so that he can explore the world at his disposal with absolute zero limits. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet did provide something like that with the Rhydons, but for the player exclusively, I want more of that freedom to run, move, and even jump around locales by themselves, similar to how they increase the mobility for the player back in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Please do more of that. Third, and the last one for this lightning round we made, we need a better story. Look, I love Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's story, and so I suggest we should have more of that. But we should also have something more mature for the fan base to add something extra juicy to the table. No, we're not talking SMT levels of maturity, but go back to writing deeper stories like what you did back with Pokemon Black and White and go from there. Give us more of a reason to explore the region and its characters. Give us a place and story that enables us to take it all in, to engage with the NPCs, to have these side quests that allows us to see more of the world, to engage with the locales of each region and how the Pokemon truly interact within it. Give us something that makes it stand out and truly feel not only a good Pokemon game in story, but a good RPG storyline where it pulls, it tugs, and it strings at your heart from start to finish. Give us what Pokemon was always about, a story about friendships, success, finding yourself, and most importantly, being the trainer you were meant to be as you journey through a brand new world with a brand new attitude. Again, to tie it all back to the idea from the beginning, what I've said wasn't to make the perfect Pokemon game, but at the same time, it doesn't hurt to provide something to the table from the perspective of a fan who basically grew up with the franchise. In case it wasn't stressed enough, I love this franchise so much. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent my time discussing what I feel about them, nor would I even make this video without the intentions of wanting something better in the most civil ways possible. I grew up with this franchise since 2009, with Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky being my very first Pokemon game and experience, so I understand how a Pokemon game should feel and improve down the line. I've seen how they jumped the graphical design from the GBA to the DS with Pokemon Emerald to Diamond and Pearl. I played a proper remake in the form of Heart Gold Soul Silver that improves the quality of that game's mechanics back in the day and how it was opted for the modern formula at the time. I've experienced what a good definitive edition is like with Pokemon Platinum and its entire difficulty. I've seen them vastly improve the DS quality with the Black and White games and how they amplified everything in the best ways possible with its sequels later on. And I even seen them dip their toes in the 3D realm with Pokemon X and Y and provide a good starting point for Pokemon, but since 2013, they have not jumped the gun in actually improving the games like they've done before. It all became stale little by little, and now it doesn't feel right to play anymore. It doesn't feel like I should be enjoying these games despite it clearing saying it's Pokemon and my favorite Pokemon are there right in front of me, but it's not the same. Now more than ever, Pokemon has to be different and it has to be better or else it's just game over, man. Sure, yeah, they sell millions every year because we're gonna buy all the stuff anyways for the sake of nostalgia, but it's high time they start using that money they make to invest in the game some more instead of doing this whole multimedia shtick that, quite frankly, I'm pretty tired of seeing. Legends Arceus was that perfect stepping stone, and all they needed was to improve from there. But seeing Scarlet and Violet's performance since release, paired with how lack of adjustments the DLCs have brought to the game, I don't even know anymore with this franchise. Like, all I really want at the end of the day is a really damn good Pokemon game that brings me back to the good old days of when I was a kid playing on my Nintendo DS. So I feel like it's not that much of an ask, right? But in the eyes of Pokemon Company, it seems like a hard reach, but maybe this might spark some discussions in the comments below, or for some Poketubers and other content creators to also speak their minds, because I'm sure they feel the same way I do too. But for now, I'm gonna be putting a pin on this, and I'll probably revisit this thought later because I feel like I've said my piece enough, and I want to leave things off with this, with this idea that Pokemon games absolutely deserve better than they have. And I think the best way to end this off is to go back to a time when I felt like a kid again, and I think when many felt that way too. And so the best way to leave off this video is by doing this.